Welcome to the 2020 Senior Project Presentations Night. Senior Project is a capstone project for students at Wesley School. 12th graders spend most of their first semester honing their research skills on a project of specific interest to them. They write first a 2,500 word and then a 5,000 word research paper in MLA or APA format. Beginning last year, they also go through a formal process of defending their thesis in front of a panel of teachers. This year, as we are learning online during the global COVID-19 pandemic, we have done all these steps entirely online. At Wesley School, we believe that all knowledge is best understood through the worldview of the Bible. These students present uniquely Christian responses and raise questions that show they have engaged with the content through a Christian worldview. Each year, the students of Senior Research Project class display their research with an audio-visual presentation for the school community. This is usually followed by a time of fellowship in the school gym, where the audience can meet up with the students and ask them follow-up questions as students man creatively presented booths. This year, we have put together the elements of the speech and the booth and added a new skill to the coursework as students have learned how to create and edit videos. As video content creation is so important in our world today, I believe this 21st century skill will be a valuable addition to their skill set. Let me remind you that the video presentations you are going to watch are only a small part of all the work that these students have done. Their 5,000 word research papers and the sources they have used for the videos are linked in the description below. If you did not watch this as a premiere, you will also be able to use the chapter features to skip right to the section where your own son's or daughter's speeches are, to watch them again in detail. After we finish this premiere, I welcome you to join a Zoom call where you can meet up with these students and ask them questions related to their research. Once again, I welcome you to sit back, turn up the volume, and enjoy the speeches from this wonderful group of students.
In November 2018, the first genetically modified embryos were born. The embryos were edited by Chinese geneticist He Jiankui. His goal was to eliminate the risk of HIV disease by modifying a gene called CCR5. However, one serious concern that many people bring up is whether or not it was ethical.
In fact, He Jiankui was actually sent to jail because of his action. He has been sentenced for 3 years in prison.
This leads to the question, should gene therapy be put to clinical use? Today we'll be focusing on the ethics of gene editing. Gene therapy is a method to add, remove, and replace genes to fix genetic mutations. For a long time, gene therapy has just been science fiction, but recently a new invention has made it more feasible. CRISPR-Cas9. CRISPR-Cas9 is the most effective and most promising technique used for gene therapy so far. It was invented by Jennifer Doudna and her associates in 2015. In this technique, a type of genetic material called CRISPR creates a protein called Cas9, and Cas9 cuts off parts of DNA that CRISPR commands it to. Then, a benign virus delivers the corrected version of that DNA. Gene therapy could be done on 2 different kinds of cells. The first are somatic cells, which make up almost all of the cells in our body. Some examples of these are brain cells, skeletal muscle cells, and heart cells. The other types of cells are germline cells. These are involved in reproduction and include the egg and sperm cells. The main difference between gene edits on somatic cells and germline cells is that in somatic cells, the edits can only stay within that one organism, while the edits in germline cells can be passed down through generations. The first ethical concern is whether we would be crossing a line if gene therapy were put to clinical use. From a Christian or religious standpoint, our makeup of genes may be something to be left to God. Gene editing may seem unnatural and unethical. However, the parable of the talents actually encourage us to pursue gene therapy, since we would be investing God's gifts to develop better medical treatment.
In this parable, a master gives his servants different amounts of talents based on their abilities. The servants who had been given 2 and 5 talents went out and put it to work, using it for investments, and in the end they were able to double their amount of talents. However, the servant given 1 talent chooses to bury it so that it doesn't get lost. The master was pleased with the first 2 servants, but he was very unhappy with this last servant. From this parable, we can learn that we have to use the gifts that God gives us and make the most out of them.
Because the effects of germline gene therapy are multi-generational, another ethical concern revolves around informed consent. Is the procedure ethical if we can't get consent from the future individuals it will affect? The purpose of informed consent is to make sure that the patient who will be affected knows all relevant information about their treatment. Some believe that because it's not possible to obtain patient consent in germline gene editing, it shouldn't be done. But bioethicist John Harris points out that if we follow this logic, nobody could choose to have children. Harris, like many other scientists, believes that for germline gene editing, parental consent is sufficient. Parents already make decisions for their children, such as their education and nourishment. And since children didn't choose to be born, our duty is to make sure these decisions are in the best interest of the child. The same would go for gene editing procedures. Harris's views reflects the opinion of a majority of scholars within the field. One of the most prominent ethical questions is whether the risks of germline gene editing outweigh its benefits. Gene therapy has a potential to replace care with cure. This means that rather than treating a disease to reduce the severity of its symptoms, gene therapy could completely cure it and remove it from the patient. An example of this is diabetes. Patients with type 1 diabetes usually need to wear multiple devices to monitor and regulate their blood sugar levels. These devices can be a burden to everyday living, but diabetes is just one of the milder examples. Other diseases could cause more serious disruptions to day-to-day life. For example, children who inherit a mitochondrial disease could experience seizures, heart problems, and hearing loss, and often pass away at an early age. Mitochondrial replacement therapy, a form of germline gene editing, could cure this disease. A Time magazine article tells the story of numerous couples who are eager to receive the treatment. Evan and Christelle Shulman, for example, look forward to receiving the treatment as they have already lost a child due to Christelle's genetic mitochondrial disease. However, a journal article discussing the ethics of gene editing point out that there are often alternative treatments. Here, the authors quote Marcy Darnowski, the executive director of the Center for Genetics and Society, in discussing an alternative for mitochondrial replacement therapy, that is, preimplantation genetic diagnosis. In this procedure, eggs are received from the ovary and screened for diseases. Those without a mutated gene will be selected for implantation to produce a child. This way, genetic diseases are prevented before birth. Still, in some cases, alternatives like these are not as effective. The previously mentioned Time magazine article tells how Shelley Beverly and her husband have tried alternatives to mitochondrial replacement therapy. However, these attempts did not work because their embryos were too heavily affected by mitochondrial mutations. Therefore, their best hope would be gene therapy. Despite the great prospects gene editing proposes, it's important to remember that gene editing is still a relatively new concept. This means that despite the availability of CRISPR-Cas9, gene editing technology is still not perfect. One of the most dangerous risks associated with gene editing are off-target mutations. This means that CRISPR could edit the wrong gene, not the one that needs to be fixed. Since one change in a gene could cause major changes in the human body, the effects of faulty gene therapy are unpredictable. According to an article authored by Emma Hapaniemi of the Department of Medical Biochemistry at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden and her colleagues, gene therapy can be cancerous. Cells where p53 are dormant are commonly chosen to be edited in gene therapy. However, the use of CRISPR was found to activate p53 proteins and occasionally cause p53 mutations. These mutations have been associated with cancer cell development. Faulty gene editing procedures like this might suggest that we should halt the pursuit of gene therapy. Indeed, this course of action would allow us to prevent any possible major damage to our natural genetic makeup, but at the same time, the potentials of gene therapy would be wasted. On the other hand, starting the clinical use of gene therapy would be premature due to its shortcomings of technological accuracy. An evaluation of its risk-benefits ratio suggests that the best option would be to postpone the clinical use of germline gene therapy. Taking this course of action would allow for more successful and safe attempts. Once more research has been conducted and more knowledge is obtained on gene therapy, we can avoid many of the risks that come with it. Nonetheless, a limitation is that there are so many ideas and risks that need to be discussed before gene therapy can be used clinically. There would be so much to research and it would take a very long time to finish. Furthermore, it would be difficult to find support and funding for research on gene therapy. Currently, much of society is still against it, and in fact, the US government refuses to fund gene therapy research. Despite these limitations, research on germline gene therapy should not be put to a complete halt. As Christians, this technology must be regarded as an extraordinary opportunity with vast potentials, and thus it must be further pursued. Postponing its clinical use would be beneficial, as it would allow us to ensure safety as well as settle opposing viewpoints within the field and solidify the diverse ideas about germline gene editing. After all, there is no being too careful if the effects of clinical use of germline gene therapy would last forever, inherited by future generations and multiplied amongst them.
In 2017, a middle school girl was physically assaulted by her friends. She was taken out of sight and was hit multiple times with alcohol bottles, iron pipes, and possibly anything they could use to cause harm against her. Not only that, she was even taken to a karaoke place where she was beaten again with mics. Some people might say, oh, but that's just middle school girl fights. It can't be that serious. Well, you won't be able to say that when you see this. This is the mosaic picture of the victim, and I could not put the original picture in because it was too terrible. Now then, what punishments did the perpetrators get? Definitely not a lot in the public's opinion. This is because of the juvenile law of South Korea. According to the law, the maximum punishment children aged between 10 to 14 can get is 2 years at the reformatory, but most of the times they're just put on probation, which is frequently getting observed by officers and doing some social services. Plus, their criminal records get deleted after they're finished with their punishment. For children aging between 14 to 19 years old, the maximum sentence they can get is 20 years regardless of whatever crimes, how violent, and how many crimes they commit. However, all of the perpetrators for this incident were just put on probation, whether they were 14 years old or 15 years old. The judges say that this decision was made so that children would be better reformed and would be able to come back to society through probation without the need for harsher punishments. Another incident is rental car theft and murder incident. In March of 2020, 13-year-old children stole a rental car and drove 160 kilometers without a license. When they found out that they were being chased by the police, they ignored the traffic signals and road lines and increased their speed recklessly. As a result, they hit a university student and the victim passed away on the spot. Only one student in the car, the driver, was sent to reformatory, which has a maximum for 2 years, and the other 7 students who were in the car were simply sent back to their parents. On their social media, they posted a nice selfie of themselves, and they posted comments like, "Lol, we just filmed Fast and Furious," and "People on Facebook are swearing at me, but I'm mad because I almost died too." There was no indication of penitence for what they had done. Over the recent years, many incidents of juvenile crimes in South Korea became famous after being shared on social media. The public's opinion is that these juvenile criminals show no signs of regret or repentance, yet even after assaulting and killing, the punishment is rather weak. People worry that these criminals would commit crimes again because of these weak punishments, and they feel that the punishment should be harsher. The data and statistics from UNESCO and various Korean news websites also support this hypothesis. The percentage of repeat juvenile offenders who were convicted more than 3 times rose from 9.2% in 2008 to 18.8% in 2014. And the percentage of juvenile offenders who were convicted again in less than a year is in an increasing trend from 10.1% in 2013 to 14% in 2016. In 2017, 4,163 adolescents committed crimes again even after they were put on probation. Among them, 90.4% committed crimes again within a year. Plus, violent crimes committed by juveniles, which comprise of murder, robbery, and sexual violence, increased from 28.4% in 2015 to 33.7% in 2017. According to the South Korean government index, juvenile criminals are more than 2 times likely to reoffend than adult criminals, by percentage being 12.3% to 5.6%. Instead of allowing time for reform, lax laws are promoting an increase in criminal activity. The South Korean Minister of Justice says that the goal of juvenile law is to reform juvenile criminals and to prevent further juvenile crimes from happening. But all of these statistics show that the government is not doing a very good job of reforming the juvenile criminals. Therefore, a change is needed. But is giving harsher punishments to these criminals the solution to this problem? The answer is actually no. The United States Department of Justice says that sending a convicted criminal to prison, increasing the severity of the punishment, or death penalty actually are all not very effective in deterring crimes. The United Nations add to this by saying that juvenile criminals often end up in detention centers which are inappropriate for their age and their development. They report that when juvenile criminals were put together with adult criminals in a detention facility, mistreatments and abuse by adult criminals such as violence, sexual violence, bullying, extortion, and torture were evident inside detention facilities. And in these environments, it's even more difficult for the juvenile criminals to be reformed and to come back to society. Instead, it might even lead to serious damages inflicted to juvenile criminals who are still developing and do not have a fully developed self-identity and ego. In order to fix this problem, we should in fact look at the problems of probation system and reformatory capacities. In 2018, South Korea had 373 probation officers, while there were 42,514 juvenile criminals put on probation. This means that each officer took care of an average 114 children alone. Plus, reformatories are also lacking. Out of 11 reformatories in South Korea, 8 of them have more juveniles than its full capacity. Because of this, education system focusing on reform is difficult. The South Korean Ministry of Justice says that with the current reformatory system, there is a high chance the criminals will not come back reformed even if they stay there longer. Therefore, it is the problem of the system rather than the severity of the punishment. So, in order to fix this problem, South Korea should invest more in recruiting probation officers and enlarging the reformatories. In addition, we can find out how to deal with this problem of rising crime rates from other countries. For example, Germany experienced a 50% drop in the crime rates of juveniles from the age of 14 to 18 in the last decade. Criminologists believe that there were 2 factors for this decline. First was Germany's youth prison system. In German youth prisons, all prisoners were given the opportunity to learn manual skills under supervisions of social workers. They could choose one profession from 15 choices they gave you. As a result, the criminals could get out of poverty and unemployment later in the future due to these skills, which resulted in a reduction in recidivism rates. The second reason Germany had a decline of juvenile crime rates was the banning of corporal punishment. According to a psychological study made by Elizabeth Gershoff, a psychologist who has a PhD in child development and family relationships, exposure to violence at home had a very high correlation with child aggression and child crime rates. So by banning corporal punishment, young children were less exposed to violence at home, which resulted in a lower crime rate. So rather than being enraged by horrible crimes mentioned in the internet and raising our voice to punish the criminals harsher, we should calmly look for ways to effectively reform them. Matthew chapter 7 verse 3 says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" As Christians, we need to think of what God has done for us. Investing in reformation instead of retribution is a natural response to what we have received, as God has invested in reforming us as well. Without His reformatory work, we need to realize that we too would have no chance. I believe that South Korea should change their juvenile system following the example of Germany's youth prisons. South Korea's reformatory should also include a specialized educational system. The government should invest more on recruiting probation officers and enlarging the reformatories so that the reformation system and probation system will be more effective. Lastly, South Korea should also ban corporal punishment to reduce exposure to violence at home from a young age. The important thing is that we constantly move forward into the direction of changing the system so that it will effectively meet its goals to reform the juvenile criminals. And by executing these steps, I believe that South Korea will be able to successfully reduce the juvenile crime rates in the near future. Thank you.
Zoos in the United States are held to a standard. These standards are enforced by the AWA, Animal Welfare Act. The AWA is administered by the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, which enforces the laws and regulations presented by the AWA. Because it is the only federal statute pertaining to animals, it is important that the standards cover a wide variety of animal protection that adequately ensures the well-being of animals under captivity. This, however, is not the case.
There are three major problems with the AWA and the USDA. The first one being their definition of animals. The second one being their resources. And last but not least, their motivation. Those are the three biggest problems of the AWA and the USDA. Now, let's take a look at the first one.
In order for the AWA to enforce laws for animal protection, they first need to state what is considered an animal. As stated by the AWA, the term animal means any live or dead dog, cat, non-human primate, guinea pig, hamster, or possession efficiency for improving the quality of food or fiber with respect to a dog. The term means all dogs, including those who are hunting subject to Wait, or breeding purposes. Stop. Rewind a bit. Right there. The AWA states that the term animal means any live or dead dog, cat, non-human primate, guinea pig, hamster, rabbit, or such other warm-blooded animals. However, not once does it mention any cold-blooded animals, including insects, fish, reptiles, and amphibians.
Because the AWA does not consider cold-blooded animals as animals, they are not under the protection laws in place by the AWA. However, the problem is not only within the AWA, but also their administrator, the USDA, which brings us to our next problem, the USDA's lack of resources.
Firstly, one of the USDA's duties is to inspect all institutes licensed under AWA. USDA Animal Care Inspector claims to routinely inspect all entities unannounced to make sure the applicants are adhering to federal standards and regulations. This claim, however, is not supported in many cases. W. Ron DeHaven, a former inspector for the USDA, the administrator of the AWA, stated that the Animal Care Unit is too lenient on violators. This is due to their limited assets of $16 million and 111 employees to monitor 9,000 animal entertainment breeding and research facilities. Because the USDA is underfunded, they are unable to prosecute many cases and would only act on severe violations. A clear example of this was seen after the death of Kenny, a 3-year-old Asian elephant. Kenny was a part of the Ringling Bros Circus, which at the time was approved and licensed by the AWA. Kenny was clearly sick the day of the incident, as sworn by a witness who confessed to USDA investigators. Under federal regulations, sick elephants must get immediate medical care and an approval from a veterinarian to perform. The circus ignored both protocols and continued on with the show. Then, during Kenny's second performance, he began bleeding and showing obvious signs that he was unwell. Kenny was checked by circus veterinarian Gary D. West and deemed unable to perform. This was again ignored and overruled by Gunther Gebel Williams. Later that night, after the performance, Kenny was found dead, bloody, and shackled on the concrete floor.
Although after this incident there may have been many allegations against the Ringling Bros, they were not punished until later cases have stirred up animal rights activists to act. If the USDA had sufficient resources, they would be able to better manage the facilities holding animals and avoid incidents like this from ever occurring. But even if the USDA were given necessary resources, would they use it for the animals' benefit? This takes us to our next problem: motivation.
The USDA was made to carry out the laws in place by the AWA to protect animals. However, it seems that the USDA's agenda is not to enforce the most rigorous standards to ensure animal well-being, but to maintain and encourage businesses handling animals. This became apparent when Mark Chernoff, a wildlife expert, challenged Long Island Game Farm Park and Zoo, which is AWA licensed, for inhumane housing of animals. Chernoff repeatedly visited the zoo and filed complaints to the USDA each time he went. The AWA dictates that the USDA must enforce minimum requirements for the physical environment to promote the psychological well-being of primates. However, Chernoff states that the USDA has failed to do this for its facilities. Due to this complaint, the USDA decided to inspect the zoo, but eventually concluded that the facility was in line with all AWA regulations. Chernoff was trained and familiar with exotic animals, which allowed him to understand when an animal was undergoing stress. Chernoff was not satisfied with the results concluded by the USDA and decided to sue the USDA on behalf of the AWA. Although he was able to procure standing, he lost on all claims. The court deemed the conditions of the animals sufficient to maintain the minimal requirements of the AWA.
Although the decision was lastly determined by the court, the USDA could have done a better job in prioritizing animal well-being. The USDA, however, is too focused on financial success, leaving animals uncared for. Even though the Animal Welfare Act does provide minimal requirements for animal well-being, these examples have shown that it is not enough. Along with those standards, animal holders are able to follow voluntary standards. The biggest organization providing these standards is the AZA, Association of Zoos and Aquariums. The AZA not only solves the AWA's problems, but also goes above and beyond what is expected. No longer are there insufficient laws and regulations protecting animals, but a more complete and heightened standard is provided.
The AZA, as said on their website, is a non-profit organization dedicated to the advancement of zoos and aquariums. The policies cover animal welfare, care and management, veterinary care, conservation, education, scientific advancement, and many more. These policies are all in an effort to provide the most adequate laws pertaining to zoo animals. According to Steve Olson, Director of Government Affairs at the AZA, there are currently 213 AZA members, about 35 of which are aquariums that only exhibit cold-blooded animals and are not subject to the AWA. Without the AZA, these animals would be in risk of mistreatment from the handler. The AZA serves as a barrier to all the cracks left in the standards of the AWA.
As we have seen, the AZA provides the necessary standards that the AWA does not provide. Along with this, the AZA is not lacking in resources, but they are capable of holding all licensed facilities accountable.
Due to AZA's big budget, they are able to provide a more rigorous inspection process. After applications are submitted to the AZA, a process of 6 months is proceeded to inspect the facility, hold a hearing, and make a decision. During these 6 months, the zoo applying will be checked to make sure it follows all AZA guidelines. With new standards established every year, zoos must go through the entire accreditation process again every 5 years. AZA's accreditation process comes with a fee of up to $15,000, whereas it only costs $120 to get a 3-year AWA license. The hefty price tag and stringent requirement is a big factor of why most zoos are not willing to be AZA accredited. However, it is necessary to ensure the complete well-being of animals.
As you have seen, the AZA's big budget does a lot for the animals. But probably the most important reason the AZA is better than the AWA is their motivation. The AZA, unlike the AWA, is not motivated by money or businesses, but rather the animals.
AZA offers many programs for the well-being of animals, one of them being SAFE, Saving Animals from Extinction. SAFE began in 2015 as a conservation program dedicated to 10 specific species. However, as of 2019, it has grown to cover over 25 species and taxonomic groups threatened with extinction. According to the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, there are currently 16,306 endangered species. These species include 1 in 4 mammals, 1 in 8 birds, 1 in 3 amphibians, and 70% of the world's plants. These statistics show the major problem of extinction we have today. The AZA takes charge in solving this problem by encouraging their members to participate in their program, SAFE.
SAFE is only one of the many ways the AZA benefits animals. As seen through all these examples, the AZA offers much more for the well-being of animals than the AWA, but it is still not perfect. Although the AZA's heightened standards are effective in protecting most animals, the elephant is a unique species with complicated needs. Because of their demanding requirements, even the AZA is unable to provide the necessary standards. Elephants in the wild are slowly decreasing in numbers due to poaching and habitat loss. But this does not mean they belong in zoos. Elephants need to be put in dedicated sanctuaries where they are provided with the adequate living conditions.
As seen previously, the United States does not provide sufficient laws to ensure animal well-being. Although the USDA does provide some protection, it is greatly limited and lacks the ability to consistently improve animal welfare. For further precautionary measures, zoos in the United States should consider becoming AZA accredited. The AZA, although not perfect, does offer a more comprehensive heightened standard. Zoos play a big role in educating the public. However, if animals are continuously abused, future generations will not have the luxury of seeing the animals present today. Proverbs 12:10. The righteous care for the need of their animals, but the kindest act of the wicked are cruel. As citizens of this world, we have a duty to protect and care for the animals God has given us. It is time to put an end to the mistreatment of animals and begin the reformation of zoos across the United States.
COVID-19 has changed our lives in the past year. Going outside without wearing a mask now seems unimaginable. Millions of people have died from this virus, and economies are falling. Because of this, COVID-19 vaccines have been developed quickly. It's only been a year since the outbreak of COVID-19, but as of November 6, 2020, there were over 200 COVID vaccines being developed and 47 of them being tested on people. Due to rates like this, concerns on the safety of those vaccines have surfaced. In this video, I will be discussing certain risks that may arise from accelerating COVID-19 vaccine development. Let's recap a little bit. COVID-19, formerly known as SARS-CoV-2, emerged from China in 2019 and became listed as a global pandemic by WHO on March 11. Traditional vaccination refers to the process of a killed microbe injected into an organism to trigger the immune system to fight against that microbe to prevent disease. The WHO's process for developing vaccines before getting approved is divided into 5 stages. In the exploratory stage, natural or artificial antigens that may help prevent disease are researched for 2 to 4 years. In the next preclinical stage, For 1 to 2 years, animal testing are conducted to test the vaccine's safety. The next stages are phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, and human tests are performed here. Phase 1 trials test the safety of the vaccine from 20 to 80 subjects for 1 to 2 years. Phase 2 trials test for 2 to 3 years on whether the vaccine can start an immune response on several hundred subjects. Lastly, phase 3 trials test for 2 to 4 years to find any certain side effects that could appear in thousands to tens of thousands of participants. On August 11, the Sputnik V vaccine, developed by the Gamaleya Research Institute in Russia, was approved by the Russian government. But Daniel Salmon, the director of the Institute for Vaccine Safety at Johns Hopkins University, said that Russia was being reckless because the Sputnik V vaccine skipped phase 3 trials. Also, WHO stated that all vaccine candidates should go through all stages of testing before being released. Even though Mikhail Murashko, Russia's Minister of Health, said that their subjects were all safe, this information could be easily shown through phase 1 trials, so it wasn't that significant. Another company that skipped phase 3 trials is CanSino Biologics in China. In July, CanSino published their results of their phase 1 and 2 trials. Their results showed that their vaccine was safe and could produce antibodies in all subjects. However, before publishing their results and conducting the phase 3 trials, the Chinese government allowed the vaccine to be used by the Chinese military on June 25. On September 4, Margaret Harris, WHO spokeswoman, warned against rushing vaccine development during phase 3 trials because these trials could show if vaccines were truly safe. Phase 3 trials are important because they can identify certain side effects that haven't been found in smaller trials. But the two main reasons why phase 3 trials are skipped is because 1, the trial takes up around 2 to 4 years, and 2, it's challenging to gather tens of thousands of people during a pandemic. Currently, RNA and DNA-based vaccine platforms are the second largest vaccine platform used to develop COVID-19 vaccines. They don't use cultured viruses, but directly insert the virus's DNA and RNA into people's bodies. Although they can be developed quickly in large amounts, they are expensive. The biggest concern with this platform is that they've never been used before COVID-19, so we don't really know if it's really safe. Plus, top candidate vaccines like Moderna or Pfizer use this platform. Another vaccine platform called live attenuated virus may also have issues. LAV was used to develop vaccines for MERS and SARS, which are other branches of the coronavirus's family. But there were concerns that LAV actually made lung diseases worse through antibody-dependent enhancement. Even so, Barney Graham, Deputy Director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said that since SARS was structured differently to viruses that had ADE, it won't occur in COVID-19 vaccines. But it may still be important to test ADE occurrence because MERS and SARS vaccines hadn't been accepted. On October 20, the Human Challenge Consortium, which consists of the UK government representatives from the National Health Service and a private company, said they were going to conduct a human challenge trial. This study was questioned because it purposely exposes COVID-19 to up to 90 healthy people aged between 18 to 30 years. And even though this plan hasn't been approved yet, it could begin in January. Andrew Catchpole, chief officer at Open Orphan, which is the company leading the study, stated that Open Orphan usually gives volunteers £4,000 for participating. The idea of purposely exposing people to COVID-19 seems problematic, and low-income families might join this study more since they need money. As Christians, God gave us life as a gift, and it should be used carefully. It may be worth thinking about whether it's okay to risk someone's life just because they are fine with it. However, Josh Morrison, co-founder of One Day Sooner, an organization that supports human challenge trials, said that those trials were safe because they were already conducted in the past for diseases like influenza and respiratory syncytial virus. But Charles Wager, a member of the WHO's Working Group for Guidance on Human Challenge Studies in COVID-19, said how COVID-19 shouldn't be compared to those diseases because it is barely understood and 10 times more deadly than influenza. Perhaps one of the biggest reasons to support accelerating the development of COVID-19 vaccines is to save the economy. As of June, Christopher Cinder, professor of economics at Dartmouth College, stated that accelerating the development by 1 month could save $375 billion without considering mortality, health, and other costs. But this amount could decrease if problems with COVID-19 vaccines are found out after their release. The UK government invested £33.6 million to support the human challenge trials, and the Warp Speed program, a partnership created by the US government to speed up the COVID-19 vaccine development, received almost $18 billion. If vaccines that are not made safely make people sick, then there could be a bigger economic loss in the future. As of September 17, 49% of US adults said they would definitely or probably would not get vaccinated at this time. Only 21% said they would definitely get vaccinated. When asked about the speed of the vaccine approval process, 78% of Americans said they were moving too fast without being sure that the vaccines were truly safe and effective. Even though people might be more willing to receive COVID-19 vaccine as time passes by because it's a pandemic, gaining the public's trust is still very important. If the public is not willing to get vaccinated, there wouldn't be much effect on speeding up the developmental process and releasing them quickly. As this pandemic puts fear and panic in the world, we Christians must have wisdom and be courageous. We must pray for an end to this pandemic and for God to give wisdom to researchers so that a complete and affordable vaccine can be developed quickly. Although vaccines do have to be developed quickly, the processes must be transparent and be able to be held accountable. Individuals should have the freedom of choice to get vaccinated or not after knowing the risks. If vaccines are released without ensuring their safety just to restore social life and the economy, a bigger risk may arise later. But if the vaccines are successful, like the candidates such as Moderna or Pfizer, which showed strong effective rates, this could result in faster vaccine development in the future and allow quicker responses to other global health issues.
Sick and tired of the constant exploitation of the loopholes in the U.S. immigration system that allow for millions of migrants to enter the U.S. illegally? Well, I've got the perfect solution for you with Bryan's 100% proof solution. For the cost of only 10 minutes of listening, Bryan's solution provides an answer for all of these, destroying competition like Bernie, Biden, and Trump. Say goodbye to all the bad, safe work environments with illegal immigrants and the $115.9 billion annually in the lack of taxes paid.
Oh, hello there. My plan has got both God and logic on my side. The Bible states that God gives civil authorities the right to punish those who break their laws, stating in Romans 13:1-3, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that have existed have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resist what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of those who are in authority? The Bible makes it clear that it advocates for humanitarian migration, saying in Leviticus 19:33-34, "You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself." In fact, Mary and Joseph fled persecution from Herod when Jesus was a child, and Joseph's family from the Old Testament sought asylum in Egypt. During both of these instances, the Bible does not speak of unauthorized border crossing as a legitimate method for immigration. Joseph's family actually went to the Pharaoh and had to ask to stay. In Genesis 47, the Pharaoh allowed him to stay, but this was not always the case, fending off outsiders who were looking to take from the abundance in Egypt. The Bible also allowed for distinction between immigrants and natives. Gentiles were forced to follow the Israelites' laws, such as following the respect for the Sabbath. In short, the Bible believes in legal border crossing, legal asylum seeking, and believes that civil authorities have the right to punish those who break the laws within their borders, implying a stance against illegal immigration. I have created a plan to defeat illegal immigration in pursuit of this. I believe that the current system incentivizes illegal immigration, which slows down immigration. This prevents the reality of legal immigration and legal asylum seeking to an extent. Illegal immigration isn't the only thing behind this, however, as an increase of funding towards legal immigration and also a change in quota will help serve this purpose. The plan involves allowing an alternative visa be given to illegal immigrants in the US, providing better funding for ICE and immigration courts, and an increase in use of expedited removals, an increase in fines for illegal immigrants and employers of them, quota reform, and getting rid of the Flores Agreement and sanctuary cities. There are currently 12 million undocumented immigrants living in the US as of right now. It would be morally wrong to deport all of them. It would also be too expensive, costing an average $10,854. There would also be empty positions that would be hard to replace. We also can't just leave them all as illegal immigrants, as they would be causing the negative effects of illegal immigration, and it would be immoral as well to just leave them to suffer in their position. Which is why the best solution would be to provide illegal immigrants in the US, minus the criminals, the opportunity for a visa for permanent residence in the USA. The visa, similar to a green card, would allow them to live in the United States if they do not commit any crimes, and render them unable to vote. Unlike green card recipients, they would not be able to apply to federal welfare programs or be eligible to apply for citizenship or sponsorship, because this would flood the immigration courts with too many cases, and providing welfare would cost an estimated $2.6 trillion. This sort of visa would only be handed out once to those residing in the US at a certain time, as it would encourage illegal immigration if it remained. In addition to providing amnesty, the US should increase the funding for ICE and remove sanctuary cities to increase the perception of enforcement. This is because an increased perception that a criminal will be caught and punished deters crime, according to the National Institute of Justice. And increasing the size of ICE and getting rid of sanctuary cities would do exactly this, in turn decreasing illegal immigration. Sanctuary cities are cities that do not cooperate with ICE or any type of federal immigration enforcement. The immigration court should increase in budget so that they can improve the processing for legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. Immigration courts are currently overworked. The immigration cases have increased sixfold in 12 years, from 2008 with 186,097 cases to 2020 with 1,252,028 pending cases, causing court judges to each have 2,407 cases each, which is roughly 3 times the caseload of a US district court judge. This is partly caused from the lack of personnel. The amount of judges in immigration courts have grown from 245 judges in 2010 to 520 judges in 2020. The US should use expedited removals against illegal immigrants. These expedited removals allow for illegal immigrants to be removed without a court hearing, which would get rid of the case backlog, as they would get rid of the loophole created from giving illegal aliens the ability to fight deportation in immigration courts, which allows them to continue living illegally in the US, as these courts have the highest rate of failure to appear in the country. If there were more judges and expedited removals were used more, immigration courts would be able to make deportation decisions quickly and process more legal immigrants. These actions will decrease the processing of time for legal immigrants, making legal immigration a much more realistic possibility for many, as the average wait time for cases to be heard is 2 years, with cases in some states taking 4 years. The US should fine illegal immigrants and employers who hire illegal immigrants more heavily to decrease illegal immigration. Illegal immigrants are usually motivated economically, as there is a positive relationship between a higher attempt to enter the US and how bad the economy is in an immigrant's home country. So large fines that counteract this by making the cost outweigh the benefits are extremely beneficial. This would also apply to the employers of the illegal immigrants who are taking advantage of the system put into place. Large fines would disincentivize them from hiring illegal immigrants, as the costs would outweigh the benefits, which is what businesses care about. As of right now, employers only face fines for hiring illegal workers as small as $375 to $3,200, the first offense per employee, and $3,200 to $6,500, the second offense per employee. These fines are way too small, as they allow employers to profit from hiring illegal immigrants. This is because they are paid 42% lower than those who are US or legal residents. This makes it so that the repercussions of getting caught are very low, because most of the employers would be breaking even or even profiting from the crime anyways. The US should reform their immigration quotas as well, as they make it difficult for people to immigrate into the US, increasing the demand for illegal immigration. The US should do this by removing quotas on countries, as it forces US citizens to wait up to 21 years in certain cases for family-sponsored visas. Increasing the quotas for employment-based green cards would allow for the US to gain skilled workers and entrepreneurs that would benefit the country, especially the quotas for people with extraordinary abilities, which is made out of Nobel laureates, scientists, NBA players, business leaders, all of whom would help the economy. There is a caveat though to allowing more immigrants in, especially those that would originally be illegal immigrants. The increase of quotas and sped up immigration as a result of the quicker immigration courts would cause an influx of low-skilled immigrants, which would increase labor supply and harm disadvantaged native workers' wages. There is no solid solution to this problem, for however, the increase in quotas for entrepreneurs increasing the country would alleviate this by increasing the number of jobs available. The effects of high-skilled workers entering the country as a result of the new quotas would also provide new jobs by expanding the companies that they work for. The effects the high-skilled workers led into the country as a result of the new quotas would also provide new jobs, because these high-skilled workers would be expanding the business already established in the United States. There are also entrepreneurs coming amongst these skilled workers. The US should get rid of the Flores Agreement, which ensures families that enter the US seeking asylum are released after 20 days of detention during the proceedings. Due to the long process times for the overworked immigration courts, most of these migrants are released into the country where they live illegally. Smugglers have taken advantage of this loophole by organizing fake families to easily make them enter into the US. This Flores loophole has incentivized migrants so much that the family unit apprehensions from 2013 to 2019 have increased by more than 2,800% because of its ease of exploitation. So forget about Biden and Trump and choose my plan for the US, as it is in accord with the Bible, disincentivizes illegal immigrants, frees immigration courts, and benefits potential migrants.
Have you ever thought how often you lie to other people? Lying has become a critical habit, and the rate of lying has considerably grown among people. People tend to lie in some circumstances where they want to gain an advantage. But people actually think that lying is good and necessary in some circumstances. Moreover, some cultures claim to be Christian, but they still consider lying as acceptable. And this seems abnormal for Christians, since lying is considered a sin. This presents a particular challenge for Christians who want to reach out to the culture that is permissive of lying. Identifying and adapting to the new culture becomes more challenging. Christians can come up with the questions: number 1, how should Christians deal with lying? Number 2, how can we avoid saying lies? Lastly, are lying or telling the truth the only two options available for Christians? What is deception? The act of causing someone to accept as true or valid what is false or invalid. Deception has the same definition as lying. Lying is known as a statement that makes other people believe in false information. Normally, people lie in a situation where they want to benefit themselves or benefit others. Lies are more complicated than we thought, and this topic should be taken seriously among people. Sometimes, people lie when they want to avoid harming others, and they hope this can bring them peace in their relationship. However, this is temporary. Once started, lying leads to a continual web of lies to cover up previous lies and maintain a false image. This seems easy and simple, but finding the new way to lie and pretending requires extreme effort. People sometimes casually tell lies to other people and think that it is not wrong. Sometimes they do not even realize they lied. There are several reasons why people tend to lie in specific situations. First, to avoid uncomfortable situation. Second, to not hurt other people's feelings. Lastly, to avoid punishments. First of all, people lie to avoid an uncomfortable situation. It is sometimes hard to get out of the conversation. If there is no other way to stop the conversation, people lie to avoid those kinds of situations. Secondly, people lie to avoid harming others, which happens often in daily life. For instance, if someone comes up to another person and asks their opinion about the new outfit. However, the other person honestly thinks it doesn't look good on that person. But the person knows that if he or she tells the truth about their opinion, the other might feel upset about their honesty. Last but not least, people lie in a situation where they might get punished by their parents or by other people. Everyone during their childhood probably has experienced a time when they had to lie to their parents to not get punished. Eventually, people lie to benefit themselves or to protect themselves in various situations. Lying in these situations is often seen as harmless. Lying has become part of human nature. It is hard to find anyone who can confidently say that they never told a lie. People unintentionally learn and begin to lie during their childhood. Children who did something wrong that their parents could get bad at them will unconsciously say that they did not do it just to avoid getting punished or disappointing their parents. Culture is something that emerges from humans. Unfortunately, humans are not perfect enough to make the culture perfect or better. Since humanity is not perfect, they always make mistakes. Additionally, cultures make up lies to make themselves look perfect and to hide their flaws. This happens to many people even though they know that lying is inappropriate and risky. Therefore, social pressure is a factor that contributes to lies from a young age and continues into adulthood and public political life. Even for those who profess to be religious and whose religions speak against lying, lying that has become part of the culture poses a very difficult challenge. Although many religions tell people not to lie, their aim for social harmony as an ultimate good make lying to maintain that social harmony a very real option. Christianity, on the other hand, does not place social harmony as the ultimate good and shows that God hates lies in all their forms. Christianity teaches that lying is a sin. According to Proverbs 13:5, Christians should not talk falsely to others. But because they are exposed to the world, they are sometimes influenced by the cultural norms and values they are living with. Christians lie in various situations to avoid the disadvantages they might receive. Then in what situations do Christians usually lie? First, to keep the relationship with others. Second, to protect themselves from critical situations. First of all, Christians tend to lie to preserve their relationship with each other. For instance, Christians lie to not get into conflict with other people. Christians know that hurting other people's feelings is not a good thing to do because they are taught to love one another as Jesus Christ did. However, it is possible to be polite without lying. Despite this fact, people tend to tell lies because they do not really know how to be polite while honestly sharing a critical point of view. Secondly, Christians lie about their faith when the situation comes to threaten their lives. For instance, Peter denied knowing Jesus when people asked him, because he was afraid to get punished. However, in the Bible, there were some people who refused to lie about their faith. The example could be Daniel, who was thrown into the den of lions, and Shadrach, Meshach, and also Abednego, who were thrown into the fire because they refused to deny their faith. If it is possible, Christians should not create an environment where they should lie in the first place. Also, Christians should get used to asking God before they do something or say something. Because God is Lord and Christians should trust Him to be in control. Obedience must follow in all areas and at all times, including when Christians are tempted to lie. On the other hand, Christians must have questions based on these facts. Was God wrong to tell people not to lie and to be perfect? Joshua 21:45 says, "Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled." God is someone who will fulfill the promises He made. So God was not wrong to say people should not lie. Even Jesus, when He was on the earth, He never sinned. Also, in John 8:44, it is mentioned that lying is a temptation that is from the devil. It also mentions Satan is the father of lies. This also means that if Christians lie, they are acting like Satan instead of God. In the Bible, it often mentions that lying is a sin that God hates. As these verses show, the Bible is extremely strict about committing sins, including lying. Also in the Bible, it clearly states that when people face hard situations, they should always pray for the right response to every situation. This is clearly written in Matthew 10:19 and Acts 4:29. Keep having a conversation with God while Christians are determining the right thing is important, because this will give them confidence with what they say and what they do in any situation. Christians should not compromise their values because of the culture around them. God has provided many creative ways of overcoming these challenges without resorting to lies. Besides, Christians should not bet on repentance. People should not use God's mercy as a license for sin. God is someone who will listen and forgive them if they repent. But there are natural consequences to lying that they will still need to face. Christians need to depend on God and pray before they make any decision. There are many situations where lying or telling the truth may not be the only options. The best way for Christians to figure out what they should do is by asking themselves how much their answer will or won't hinder God's kingdom agenda. Praying to God and asking for help before doing or saying anything could be another way for Christians. They should not depend on themselves, but Christians should depend on God for everything. Although God gives people choices, whether or not to lie, they should not forget that their goal while living on earth is to always tell the truth as it is written in the Bible.
The number of people who consume meat has been rapidly increasing throughout the world. There are several reasons why the total amount of meat consumed is rising each and every year. It is mainly due to an increase in average individual incomes and population growth. According to OECD data, the meat consumption of the United States nowadays is like this. As you can see, it is going up steadily. However, the meat consumption of the United States in the past was much higher than any other countries in the world. There was a significant amount of meat consumption between 1961 and 2003. It indicates that the United States still remains the highest contributor to total meat consumption. However, Did you know that the meat consumption can negatively affect environment and also raise public health concerns? First of all, let's look at some of the health issues. In today's society, people are raising their voices on reducing meat eating for many reasons. Meat is essential and it's a great source of energy. But high meat consumption may cause numerous health issues. The meat we eat can be identified into several categories. Red meat is muscle meat from beef, veal, pork, lamb, horse, and deer. White meat mainly refers to poultry and fish. There is also processed meat, which includes any types of meat products, such as bacons or sausages. When humans consume meat, it could lead to high levels of cholesterol in the bloodstream, which could cause atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. Processed meat is classified as Group 1, which is carcinogenic to humans. There is also sufficient evidence from epidemiological studies that eating processed meat causes colorectal cancer. According to the World Cancer Research Fund, there is also strong evidence that consumption of either red or processed meat are both causes of colorectal cancer. Red meat is classified as Group 2A, which is probably carcinogenic to humans. There are only limited evidence for red meat. Another significant impact of the meat industry is its impact on the environment. Greenhouse gas. Gases that trap in the atmosphere are called greenhouse gases. Livestock in the farms such as cows, sheep, produce methane by burping and flatulence. This process is called enteric fermentation. Surprisingly, enteric fermentation was responsible for 28% of human-related methane emissions, which is higher than oil and gas being produced by burning fossil fuels. Although methane is the second most emitted greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide, it tends to trap more heat than carbon dioxide. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, methane's global warming potential over 100 years is 21 times higher than carbon dioxide. Water. The meat industry requires significant quantities of clean water. Animals are raised in enormous facilities called animal feeding operations. There are over 60 billion animals using enormous global resources, such as water. In our world, more than 2 billion people are experiencing water scarcity, while livestock production has already been using more than 15% of all irrigation water. Livestock production consumes more fresh water than any other activity in the United States. By reducing the amount of meat intake for individual diet and increasing reliance on a plant-based diet, we could cut the water scarcity problem in half. It is also an inefficient protein source, because in order to produce 1 kilogram of animal protein, it requires 100 times more water than producing 1 kilogram of grain protein. This table is showing that there is not a remarkable difference between the total protein and the total energy produced by food made with grains and animal products compared to the number of natural resources being used to grow livestock. Animals only consume about 1.3% of water. However, when the water used for forage and grain production is included, animals' water usage increases significantly. What can we do to reduce meat consumption? What are the alternatives for meat? As I mentioned earlier, meat is an essential source of energy. Excessive consumption may lead to risk of many health issues, yet we do need some amount of meat. Many reports have been suggesting that the government should make adjustments to the system of meat production. There are ways to protect people without demanding a change of dietary habits. For example, cigarettes are being advertised in a way people will think once more when they make a choice. Food production and consumption have been excluded from climate policies, although they might have a potential impact on such problem. Some people suggested putting more taxes on meat so the price will rise and it will be resulting in benefits for both health and the environment. What are alternatives? Both plants and animals can provide protein. Proteins are made up of amino acids that exist throughout the human body. The first difference between plant and animal proteins is their amino acids. Complete proteins have 9 essential amino acids. Some animal products such as red meat and poultry are a complete source of protein. However, most plant proteins are not complete proteins, yet plant-based foods are still rich in proteins. Getting more of your protein from plants actually has numerous health benefits. Plant protein supplies fiber, antioxidants, and other nutrients that we need more of in our diet. There are also many reasons why people should look for alternatives for meat. The world population is growing quickly and it will be reaching 9 billion by 2050. If the population grows without stopping, double amount of meat will be needed compared to the meat that is being produced now. However, growing more livestock will only harm the climate much quicker. There are still other, more creative options for obtaining proteins. Insects account for the largest biomass of all creatures. There are a total of 5.5 million species, and 2,000 species of insects are consumed in 113 countries already. Insects produce a sufficient amount of protein for our daily requirements. They have an ample amount of nutrition, and it also requires less land, water, and feed. They require relatively small space to breed. However, consumer acceptability for edible insects is still too limited, especially in Western countries. People's attitudes to food have changed over time, and there is hope for change here too. For example, lobsters in America used to be a type of food eaten by slaves and prisoners. Lobsters were even used as fertilizers and fish bait due to their abundance. However, during the late 19th century, their status changed to that of a luxury food. It developed its status due to the expansion of the US railway network, which gave access to new markets. Similarly, the way people perceive edible insects could still change over a period of time. The process of livestock production can cause serious environmental harm. The current meat agriculture system is also unethical, inequitable, and unsustainable. People have come up with culture meat, also known as lab-grown meat. It is the newest and artificially produced meat. The production of culture meat begins by painlessly harvesting muscle cells from a living animal and proliferating those cells. Although the process of making culture meat still produces greenhouse gases, it is considerably lower than what people used to do. There are still studies and researches going on to be more certain to put in the market. Both Christian and non-Christian points of view should be similar because we both live in a world where communities have to help one another. Although global warming might not directly affect us, I believe that over time people will start to realize the difference. People's behavior on meat intake not only helps others to encourage to reduce, but also helps to improve our own health. Our body is God's temple where He dwells. We should take care of our own body. People should seek out for better solutions to reduce the harm we do to the earth. God told us to take care of animals and resources. We've been using our resources to satisfy ourselves. However, it's time for us to now let the earth recover by slowing down on industrial livestock production. People should start to look for alternatives to meat. We should not only reduce it for our generation, but also for the next generation. If we want to change the world, we should change what we eat. Thank you.
Nowadays, more families tend to favor keeping pets at home. Pets and humans depend on each other and derive all kinds of benefits from each other. Pets receive shelter and food from us, while they accompany and give us emotional support. Based on this close relationship between humans and pets, there are many possibilities for using pets in psychological treatment. So we're looking at the scientific evidence and biblical perspective. There has always been a bond between humans and animals. From a biblical point of view, God created both of them on the same day, the sixth day of His creation. God also gave us the authority to rule over and take care of all the animals, and they were made to accompany us. On the other hand, when we look at the scientific evidence, different species of animals would have different feelings toward their owners. In the same way, the owner's emotional connection with the pet may be different depending on the type of animal. One of the most common pets we find in our environment are dogs. Dogs are more likely to be a good friend to humans compared to other animals because they're able to understand our commands and the words we use. Pets cannot speak, but they can still feel our emotions. According to the previous and new studies, when you feel sad or when you cry, your pets will actually feel sorry for you. Not only that, but they are also willing to help. Though they cannot speak or comfort you, they will lick you and accompany you in order to make you feel better. Pets can lower blood pressure, cholesterol levels, and also the chance of getting heart disease. The reason why pets can help lower all these illnesses is that when you play with your pets, the actions can produce more serotonin and dopamine in the brain, which will change your mood and will make you feel calmer and relaxed. Science has proven that owning a pet is good for the owner's mental health. This has helped raise the idea of having animal therapy or pet therapy. Scientists have been trying hard to find evidence to support the idea that animals of different types can help improve people's mental health, including patients with different kinds of mental disorders. For example, there was a study that did an experiment on a stressed-out group of adults. Those adults were separated into 3 groups. The first group was told to pet a rabbit. The second group was told to pet a turtle. And the third group was told to pet the toy form of the pet from one of the previous groups. The results turned out that the third group who were petting the toy had no effect, while the other 2 groups had the effect of relieving anxiety through petting a living creature, no matter whether it is a hard-shelled one or a furry one. Recent studies are even incorporating these findings into traditional hospital care. According to Ellen Beck, the director of the Center for the Human-Animal Bond at Purdue University, it used to be one of the great no-nos to think of an animal in a hospital because of the fear of getting infected by the animals. Now, I don't know of any major children's hospital that doesn't have at least some kind of animal program. One of the reasons why some people are opposed to having pet therapy is not because they think that the animals might hurt the patients, but instead, it is the other way around. People are having sympathy and empathy toward the pets that are used in pet therapy. They are afraid that the patients might have the risk of hurting the pets that are used in psychological treatments. According to the animal-assisted therapy procedures written by Mayo Clinic, the doctor will first ask the patient's permission for whether or not they want to try an animal-assisted therapy program. After the patients agree and give permission to try the therapy, they will need to wait for the doctor to prepare. Later, a trained dog and a handler will come to the patient's room. The purpose of having a handler with the dog is that the handler will answer any questions the patient may have, and also to protect the pet from getting hurt if the patient started doing things or actions that will hurt the pet. A handler's job is to protect and guide both the patient and the pet. During the therapy, the patients are allowed to pet the dog and ask questions. The whole therapy will last only 10 to 15 minutes, and then the patients will need to wait till the next time to meet the pet again. After the therapy, the patient will feel more relaxed and calm because petting a dog can help relieve anxiety. Through looking at the therapy procedures, we can see that people do not need to worry about whether or not the pet will get hurt by the patient, because there will be a handler to protect and guide both the patient and the pet. When animals are used in pet therapy or other experiments, guidelines for ethical conduct have been developed for animal care and used to protect animals from harm. These guidelines were developed by the American Psychological Association's Committee on Animal Research and Ethics. There are 7 guidelines made by the APA in total. They are justification of the research, personnel, care and housing of animals, acquisition of animals, experimental procedures, field research, and educational use of animals. According to the guidelines, researchers should be concerned that some procedures that can produce pain in humans can also produce pain in animals. During the experiment, all the procedures need to be appropriate and humane. It is also required that researchers should try to minimize the number of animals that were used in the experiment, and they should also be prepared to have alternative methods. The experiments should only be conducted after being reviewed by a professional animal care committee. In animal-assisted therapy, the most common animal or pet that is used is a therapy dog. A therapy dog usually helps people with their personal emotions or physical problems. Research has shown that therapy dogs can also benefit from their work and help people deal with their problems. Linda Kin, the owner of Positive Canine Training and Services in New York, claims that the levels of endorphins and oxytocin are higher in therapy dogs than in average family pets, which is a good effect because endorphins can help reduce pain and boost pressure. To conclude, there's always a bond between humans and animals. God created humans and animals on the same day, and He gave humans the authority to rule over all the animals. On the other hand, through looking at the scientific evidence, pets accompany humans and humans provide shelters for them. The benefits are mutual. Animals can bring humans both emotional and physical benefits. These benefits encourage people to use pet therapy to help those who are in need, especially the ones that are in the hospital or nursing house. Guidelines are developed to protect animals that are used in therapies. Therefore, there's no need to worry about therapy animals being harmed or hurt by patients. Also, the use of animals in studies is only allowed to be conducted after obtaining the permits and reaching the requirements of the federal regulations. Ethical concerns and the consideration of alternatives for the usage of animals are also included in the guidelines. Therefore, pets should be safe enough to be used in psychological treatments. Thank you.
The first thing that comes to many people's minds when they think of animal experimentation is probably cruel, unethical, painful, and suffering-involved procedures. And this leads to many people wanting to stop animal experiments. Let me share with you some reasons why we should continue animal testing in the field of psychology. Animal testing has taken a vital role in the field of psychology, specifically in psychological study and therapeutic purposes. Without the help of animal testing, many therapeutic methods which have successfully treated mentally and physically ill people will not have been discovered. Discovering new information about the brain function has only been possible by studying the behavior of animals. For instance, there was a time when scientists needed to stop the function of a monkey's amygdala, which is a part of the brain structure that controls our emotions, to find out the effects of the amygdala has on other parts of the brain. This would have been very risky to be done on humans. It would also be best to run tests first on animals rather than humans to ensure human safety. And it is inappropriate to use humans as the first experimental subjects because possible negative effects of the experiments are still being identified. Why is it better to use animals as the first experimental subject? Humans are considered to be the most unique creatures according to the Bible. It is written in Genesis 1:27, "So God created mankind in His image, in the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them." Also, humans are the only creatures that God told to take care of their bodies, since their bodies are God's temple. Our bodies involve both physical and psychological health. As a result, using animal testing for the benefit of human health should be allowed, and it is worth it. Therefore, we should continue animal testing for psychological research. Now, what are some benefits we can gain from having animal experiments? Animal testing has had a great impact on the field of science due to the similarity between humans and animals, both biologically and psychologically. Through that, advantages such as genetic and DNA experiments could be more easily done upon animals than humans. For example, when psychologists are trying to examine the development of one's brain from infancy till the end of their lives, it will be much easier to use monkeys, since monkeys have a shorter lifespan than humans. Observing changes in them is easier. Not only that, dangerous experiments that are not possible with humans are possible with animals. In other words, animals are mainly used as alternative subjects to human subjects for experiments. Through the animal experiments, psychologists and other medical practitioners can discover new ways of treatment. And these are some of them: aversion therapy, desensitization, and extinction therapy. They were discovered while researchers like Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner studied animal behavior. Sometimes the animal doesn't even need to experience the problem in order to give us valuable information. According to Joshua Gordon, the director of the National Institute of Mental Health, even if mice do not get schizophrenia, they help psychologists to discover treatments for schizophrenia, anxiety disorder, and many more psychological illnesses by studying the cells, genetic response, brain network, and how it functions and the resulting behavior. Specifically, such procedures assist researchers to come up with better hypotheses and higher accuracy to deal with such symptoms. Therefore, sometimes animal testing doesn't even have to involve animals that are diagnosed with a particular illness, but studying the brain function itself can greatly help to target successful treatment. Animal experiments not only help to come up with effective medication for humans, they also help scientists to create medicine for animals with mental disorders. For example, based on Nicholas Dotman, a professor of the Animal Behavior Department of Clinical Sciences, an anti-compulsive medication, which is a medication to treat OCD, especially for animals, has treated many animal species that are confirmed to have OCD. For example, pigs that like to bite bars and chew on chains, dogs that chase their tails, cats that overlick their fur. All of them have stopped these behaviors after being given the anti-compulsive medicine. Most of the medications that are used for mental illnesses were made after psychologists and neuropsychologists have studied the effect of stimuli or genetics on the brain, which then affects the behavior itself. However, limitations still exist in conducting animal research. First, the funding is more expensive than what most people think. For example, the inhalation testing, which is a drug testing by letting mice inhale chemicals and drugs to see the effects in their brain, which costs about $250,000 because they need to prepare the drug, the cage, the food, and other equipments needed. And a possible solution for this is sharing data with other examiners so they won't waste money on the same experiment which is already done. The second limitation is the problem of whether animal experiments are effective or not. Not all animal experiments are successful. In fact, most of them failed. But because of those failures, scientists are able to come up with successful results that heals and saves many human lives. And finally, the third limitation regarding animal experiments is the ethical issue. Many animal experiments involve cruelty such as physical or psychological pain and suffering towards the animals. For example, the Skinner's rat experiment that has electric shock to observe its learned behavior, and the monkey drug trials that train monkeys to inject chemicals into their own bodies so researchers can observe the addictive level and behavior. Regarding animal cruelty, various solutions have been proposed. For instance, limit the number of times animals are used in testing subjects as much as possible. And scientists will achieve this by, first, sharing data with one another, meaning sharing the results of experiments with other psychologists and researchers so the same type of experiment won't be repeated. Next is treating the animal subject in a more humane way so they will not experience too much pain. But some might say we need to treat animals equally like us because humans are also animals due to evolution. However, humans are not just animals, and animal welfare should not be valued at the expense of human well-being. Although torturing animals without any reason would indeed be unethical, yet the purpose of animal testing is to better understand the human body and brain and find cures for the benefit of human health, so more human lives can be saved.
Humans are the most valuable creatures in God's eyes, according to the Bible. And God has indicated that we have power over animals, as it was written in the book of Genesis. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." God has given us the authority to kill animals for our food, for our need, in Genesis. Specifically, food is a need for our body to stay healthy, because our body is God's temple. God has made humans the most unique and valuable creatures on earth, and that is why He sent His only Son to die for our sins, just to save us from eternal death. Through this, we have the right to say we are not equal to animals. We are way more precious than animals because Jesus has died for us. Any way that animals can help humans find healing is a worthy sacrifice for the greater good.
Prisons. They have been around for a long time, and it's because they have a very essential role in society. They enforce laws and lower crime with the duty to guide convicts away from criminal tendencies. However, changes made during the 1980s has changed the United States incarceration system, where prisons no longer serve the purpose of lowering crime rates and helping society, but instead to make money. This jeopardized the concept of second chances within the United States correctional system, which is why private prisons must be changed or completely abolished.
The United States has more people in prison than anywhere else in the world.
In 1983, they put the chains on me.
This is taxpayer dollars that are being used to pay a private corporation to essentially not do the job that we were paying them to do.
To provide context, we have to start at the beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to summarize for you the meeting that I have just had with the bipartisan leaders, which began at 8 o'clock and was completed 2 hours later. America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. I have asked the Congress to provide the legislative authority and the funds to fuel this kind of an offensive.
President Richard Nixon had presented a speech calling for all Americans to take action against drug abuse. This kicked off what is known as the War on Drugs. Through increased government funds, the prison population steadily increased. Until...
Good evening. Usually I talk with you from my office in the West Wing of the White House, but tonight there's something special to talk about, and I've asked someone very special to join me. It's back to school time for America's children, and while drug and alcohol abuse cuts across all generations, it's especially damaging to the young people on whom our future depends. So tonight, from our family to yours, from our home to yours, thank you for joining us. From the beginning of our administration, we've taken strong steps to do something about this horror. Tonight, I can report to you that we've made much progress. 37 federal agencies are working together in a vigorous national effort. And by next year, our spending for drug law enforcement will have more than tripled from its 1981 levels. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
President Ronald Reagan had given a speech from the White House, declaring a greater expansion upon the war on drugs, and began the tough on crime era of the 1980s. The United States prison population skyrocketed, making them the nation with the highest incarceration rate in the world. Although the tough on crime era was created to decrease crime rates and recidivism rates rose instead. The prison system had lost the trust of policymakers and the American people. As prisons' populations rose, government spending rose accordingly. The more inmates the government had, the more expensive it was to provide for them. Without the support of the public, the government struggled to maintain the prisons as they needed more money to keep up the prison's population, and issues such as overcrowding grew. That's where corporate America comes in. Businesses proposed to the government that private entities could start managing their prisons. This could help the government save more money and companies to make some too. The government, desperate to save some money, agreed, and thus the Corrections Corporations of America, or CCA, was born. Prisons have now become a business. Hold on. I know what you're thinking. You can't just sell prisons like they're cars or real estate or hamburgers. Well, according to Tom Beasley, the co-founder of Corrections Corporations of America, you can. He once said, you just sell prisons like you're selling cars or real estate or hamburgers. In their contracts with private prisons, the government has agreed to pay a fixed price for each day an inmate is incarcerated. This system creates a dilemma between fulfilling its purpose to lower crime or receiving greater financial benefit from higher incarceration and recidivism rates. Another way a private prison company could make money is by cutting costs and reducing their spending on inmates. Because of this, prisons have grown to become a lucrative industry, generating billions of dollars annually. Government-run prisons and privately run prisons have crucial differences that can dictate how each prison operates. Government prisons operate as a non-profit, while privately run prisons run to make a profit. As a company, their main goal is to maximize their profits. Private prisons have turned to extreme cost-cutting methods in the areas of labor, healthcare, and food in order to save money effectively. Labor is the largest cost for any company, which makes it a great target for private prison companies to lower their costs. An investigation on a privately run prison by the United States Department of Justice showed that in one instance, a prison had been extremely understaffed, where one guard was responsible for overseeing 64 inmates. Public prisons also face the issue of understaffing, with one guard overseeing 5 inmates. Since inmates greatly outnumber staff in private prisons, guards have had to use excessive force regularly. But the company running the prisons have been deliberately indifferent to the array of issues within their correctional facility. Private prisons have also commonly outsourced healthcare and food to a third-party service. The most notable food vendor contracted by prisons is Aramark. They're one of the largest companies in the United States and have been called the most ethical company. But there have been many reports of Aramark neglecting the well-being of the inmates. And when you're really thrifty with food, what else can you expect?
Aramark was originally hired to save taxpayers $16 million a year, but now the food service contractor that works in our prisons is causing state officials a lot of frustration.
Well, since their state contract began, Aramark has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. Finally, today came word that the state is pulling the plug on their deal. As we have been reporting for months, the company's troubles include running out of food, allegations of serving spoiled meals, even maggots found in the kitchen. And when Aramark's food wasn't the problem, its employees often were. Some were fired after smuggling drugs into prisons, others engaged in sex acts with inmates, and one is even accused right now of trying to have another inmate killed.
I mean, serving food from the trash, serving cake that rodents had eaten off of, murder for hire.
And things aren't that different from the side of prison healthcare either. Kharissa is the company known for providing inmates with healthcare, and despite being sued over 1,300 times, the company is still growing. A former healthcare technician for Kharissa has spoken out about instances where inmates have died due to a lack of medical staff on duty. A testimony by Miss Clarine, an inmate who had given birth via cesarean section in prison, stated that guards did not allow her to seek medical attention when her wound reopened, which could have led to an infection and her possible death. Luckily, she survived. After all the mistreatment that inmates have gone through, private prisons still have a few tricks to make money. An example is the minimum occupancy clause. These are terms within the contract where the government has to supply enough inmates to occupy 90 to 100% of a correctional facility. Otherwise, the government will have to pay a penalty fee. This clause incentivizes states to imprison and criminalize as many people as possible. It seems that private prisons have created a vicious cycle that exploits people for profit. Not only have they abandoned their main purpose of lowering crime, they have profited from high crime rates and high recidivism rates to attract investors.
In a recent investor presentation, CCA pitches its unique investment opportunity in a large and underpenetrated market, as only about 10% of prisoners are in private beds. The company boasts limited competition, points out public prisons are overcrowded and prison populations are growing, and declares the industry recession resistant. And finally, another reason investing in the jailing of people makes good financial sense: high recidivism. CCA cites studies that reveal high numbers of inmates return to prison again and again.
The evidence presented demonstrates why private prisons are atrocities that must be shut down. The inhumane treatment of the inmates is not the way we should be treating image bearers of God, regardless of what they have done. The root problem is the conflict of interest between rehabilitation and profit, which was created by greed. As a society, we must stress the importance of rehabilitation and reintroduce the concept back to prisons so that we are able to build a better society for all.
Thank you for taking the time to watch all of these presentations. Before we move on to the Zoom call, I want to take a few minutes to congratulate the senior class students for all their hard work on their research projects and in learning new skills. For many of them, this was the first time they have ever used professional video editing tools. Please take the time to meet with them now on Zoom and let them know what you think, and ask them to clarify any questions you might still have. Being emerging researchers, they may not have all the answers, but they're going to give you their best shot. Thank you again for taking time to be part of this very special event. God bless you all.